There's nothing but a metal cage under there.
Wow. You are ready to relieve the stress of the day.
Do you know that dating in the Old West was different? Maybe you're wondering what makes it unique. Well, partner, get ready to discover the untamed world of romance and the frontier. Y'all ain't heard stories like these before.
Make that girl your own if you've only got a mustache, a mustache, a mustache, if you've only got a mustache.
Number 10, chaperones. In the Wild West, where cowboys had a way with words, courtship was serious business. They used colorful terms like getting hitched, and spooning or sparking was no less significant. But what made it truly unique was the backdrop of the westward movement. Marriage in this untamed land offered a semblance of security, especially for widows or widowers with children. It was a dire necessity. Traditional rules had defined courtships for centuries went out the window. Marriages arranged by well-meaning parents were no longer the norm. Instead, the concept of romantic love was embraced, and it encouraged young women to leave behind their delicate complexions, feathered hats, and French perfumes. The sunburned skin replaced delicate complexions, and sunbonnets became the fashion choice. Vanilla took the place of French perfumes, and muslin and lawn replaced the bustles and trains of the Victorian era. Women in the Wild West were not just changing their wardrobe, they were changing the game. They not only embraced romantic love, but also asserted their rights politically. They demanded matrimony democracy, and one outspoken woman boldly declared, "My husband's got to make himself agreeable to me. If he doesn't, there's plenty who will." Courting in the Old West was different from what you might expect. Young men often asked the young lady's father, brother, or another male relative for permission to court her. Why? Because in those days, courtship had an inherent promise that said, we're spending time together to see if we desire marriage. Courtship didn't always equal engagement, but to some it did, and it signaled to all others that the lady was spoken for. Visits during courtship often occurred at the woman's home with another adult family member present. This wasn't your typical "may I call on you" scenario. It was more like a parlor conversation or enjoying a pleasant summer's evening on the porch swing. Walking out together was another common practice. Although standards may have been more relaxed on the frontier, young ladies still had a reputation to protect, and parents will be parents, regardless of the time. Going for a walk meant the courting couple could be in the public eye, usually allowing them to dispense with the idea of a chaperone. Number 9, small but personal gifts. Demographics in the West played a significant role, as women were vastly outnumbered by men. In the mid-1800s, one Texan lamented that there were only 60 or 70 women in all of Houston. You can only imagine the competition for their affections. In this untamed land, where chaperones were often absent, couples had more freedom to express their feelings. They would embark on buggy rides, go on picnics, cuddle in the hayloft, and kick up their heels at dances. But what really set courtship in the Old West apart was the art of gift-giving. A man smitten with a lady might express his feelings through small but personal gifts. For some, it was a locket or a coin. Couples who were financially strapped would simply exchange locks of hair as a symbol of their affection. However, one unusual gift that gained popularity in the early 1800s was the courting mirror. This wasn't your ordinary mirror. It was designed for a lady to ensure she looked her best before meeting her suitor. But there's a twist to this tale. Coffee. Yes, you heard that right. Coffee played a surprising role in courtship in the Wild West. John Arbuckle, a clever entrepreneur of the time, added coupons or vouchers to packages of coffee that could be redeemed for goods. His catalog contained thousands of items, and 28 coupons could get you a much-needed razor, which no man in love would be without. But the most popular item? A finger ring, often exchanged as a symbol of commitment. Gift-giving went both ways. He might bring a bunch of flowers or roses, carefully trimmed from his mother's garden, as a romantic gesture. She, in turn, might offer a favored suitor a locket of her hair, tied with a ribbon and carrying her perfume's fragrance. Handmade Valentine cards, a handkerchief embroidered especially for him. These were tokens of affection that spoke volumes in the language of love. But be warned, giving gifts and gift receiving in courtship had its own set of etiquette. It was a delicate dance between two people who were courting each other, often with the intention of marriage. During the 1890s, Arbuckle Brothers became the largest distributor of finger rings in the world. As one company official put it, one of our premiums is a wedding ring. And if all the rings of this pattern serves their intended purpose, then we have been participants in 80,000 weddings a year. Getting married in the Wild West wasn't always a walk in the park. Some communities didn't have a regular preacher, and they had to depend on circuit preachers who might not show up for months at a time. It wasn't unusual for a saddle preacher to ride into town and find couples waiting to wed with toddlers in hand. As one old cowboy said, "There's no cure for love and nobody wants one." Number 8. Dating in the Old West was different. In the 21st century, dating is a multifaceted landscape with countless options. Cities are bustling, rural communities have been more connected, and schools have grown in size. The western United States is now teeming with a significant population. People today often communicate via text, socialize in groups, and creatively ask each other out to school dances. Dating can range from casual to serious, with the intrinsic promise of marriage often taking a backseat. The percentage of married adults has declined over the years. But in the Old West, courtship was a horse of a different color. It was a time when dating held a clear and distinct promise. We're spending time together to see if we desire marriage. Young men would typically approach a young lady's father, brother, or another male relative to request permission to court her. This was a crucial step, but it was a public declaration that the lady was spoken for, and it didn't always lead to engagement, but it was a significant step in that direction. However, the Old West presented its unique set of challenges when it came to finding suitable partners. The population was sparse, and young men often had very limited options within a day's ride. Meeting potential partners was not as easy as swiping right on a dating app. People met through limited avenues: church, social events like calico balls, barn raising, corn husking, and Independence Day celebrations, school and family connections. Sometimes single men would temporarily relocate for employment, bringing them into contact with a few potential candidates. And when all else failed, drastic measures such as mail-order bride became a viable option, albeit an unusual one. For many young men, the intention was clear. They aimed to get married. Marriage in those days meant having a dedicated partner, someone to share the daily chores, farm work, cooking, and raising children. It was also about having safe and readily available companionship, and yes, children who could help work the land and inherit it. Young women too desired marriage, but their reasons often included seeking protection, respectability, support, love, and the prospect of having children. It's intriguing to note that some women were considered not marriageable. The courtship activities in the Old West looked nothing like contemporary dating. No movie theaters, very few restaurants, no cell phones, and saloons were not the place for upstanding women. And as for personal transportation, nobody had a car, let alone an interstate to cruise on. Money was scarce and entertainment was a rare luxury. Leisure hours were few and far between, and depending on the season, they might be practically non-existent. Number 7. Attending social events. In the Old West, attending social events required quite an effort. Founders Day parades, barn dances, church picnics, and barn raisings were some of the highlights on the social calendar. Now consider the logistics and effort involved in courting during these times. A young man might ride for miles just to ask his best gal to accompany him to an event. He'd then need to ride into town to reserve a rented rig, covering those miles again to collect the rig. Afterward, he'd ride to his lady's home, take her to the event, and finally return her home or to her homestead. The time and miles expended in this process were far from trivial. If a suitor had limited daylight hours to devote to courting, he would often seize any opportunity to be with his lady while also getting essential tasks done. To do so, he aimed to show his mettle as a provider and a hard worker. Picture this. They'd engage in a conversation while driving miles to town for a stop at the mercantile, and perhaps the suitor would gallantly offer to carry her heavy purchases. Courting might not seem like an errand to the local blacksmith, yet the young swain would enjoy being seen by competitors at her side, all while ensuring her safety and comfort. But combining work and courtship wasn't limited to away-from-home outings. Many young men were eager to spend time at their lady's home, working alongside her father and brothers. This allowed them to not only get to know the family, but also demonstrate their worth to their loved ones. In many Old West communities, there were strict rules and expectations for courtship. Couples were expected to maintain their modesty and uphold societal values throughout their courtship process. Now, you might be wondering how these lovebirds communicated and expressed their feelings in the absence of instant messaging or social media. The answer lies in the art of letter writing. Love letters played a significant role in courtship. When face-to-face interactions were limited, putting one's emotions into written words became a way to convey affection and commitment. These letters often traversed long distances and brought a sense of connection in an era when lovers might be separated by miles of untamed wilderness. Another common practice in Old West courtship was calling on a woman's family. This involved a formal visit to the woman's home where the suitor would express his desire to court her. Winning the approval of the family was essential, and such visits played a pivotal role in building trust and ensuring the young woman's safety and happiness. Number 6. Mail-order brides. In the remote and rugged areas of the West, a scarcity of women in frontier communities became a significant issue. Men flocked to these regions in search of new job opportunities, from logging and farming to striking it rich during the California gold rush. Many of them either left their wives back home or decided to postpone marriage until they settled. However, the challenge arose when they found themselves surrounded by a dearth of eligible ladies in their new communities. In response, these men turned to the written word, placing personal advertisements in magazines and newspapers. Their intention was clear. They needed the fairer sex to help civilize the frontier. Women played a vital role in taking charge of domestic chores, whether on farms or in homes. Without them to help start families, there would be no need for schools, libraries, churches, or even homes themselves. In return, the women who answered these ads sought to escape the monotony of family life and embark on a journey filled with financial security and the thrill of the unknown. This unique courtship process involved men and women communicating through letters and exchanging photographs. Courtship was a matter of words and images, building an emotional connection even before the couple met in person. The decision to marry often came after a considerable period of correspondence, turning a stranger into a future spouse. The shortage of men in the Southeast after the Confederacy's costly loss added another dimension to this practice. The Western frontier beckoned predominantly women from states like Virginia down to Mississippi. As the West was slowly tamed, women eventually joined or rejoined their male partners. In most areas of America today, women are equal to or slightly outnumber men. However, there's one exception: the state of Alaska. Men who still hold on to the romanticized ideals of the independent, self-reliant, and rugged ethos of the Old West continue to flock to the last frontier. But they often face challenges in finding girlfriends, given the persistent gender imbalance in Alaska. Number 5. Fashion for courting. Cowboys hold a special place in American legends, known for their legendary tales, from lawmen to fearless outlaws. And what sets them apart? Well, their attire, of course. The classic Old West cowboy attire is a mix of function and style, shaped by the demands of ranch work and the unforgiving Western environment. Think about this. The quintessential cowboy look includes a wide-brimmed hat that shields the face from the harsh sun, an everyday shirt beneath a cowboy vest and waistcoat, cotton or wool trousers, leather chaps that cover the lower half of the legs, tall boots with spurs, and an oversized silk handkerchief worn around the neck. This ensemble not only looks fascinating but also serves a practical purpose, keeping the cowboys protected and comfortable during their demanding ranch work. The cowboy attire is a blend of various stylistic and cultural influences that cross the vast Western boundaries. Leather, for instance, found inspiration in American Indian traditions, but early European adventurers quickly adopted its use. However, cowboys adapted these materials according to their own needs, crafting belts, boots, and gloves from leather. Victorian styling also made its mark on the basic cowboy clothing, but only when it was practical to do so. This meant that men often sported a buttoned-up etho, embracing formality to a degree. The choice of straw or light-colored hats was fashionable during the era, while wearing summer coats remained in vogue as long as the season allowed. And if you were wondering about hairstyles, shaved heads were all the rage, as long as you weren't naturally bald. But the cowboy attire wasn't just about style. It was a reflection of the times. Spending $2 on a theater ticket fell out of fashion within 3 months, and white vests were worn until they resembled the color of the earth. Even fishing in Sugar Lake was declared entirely out of fashion, along with the roads leading to the said lake. Number 4. Public displays of affection. In the Old West, love and affection weren't always kept behind closed doors. Public displays of affection, like kissing at corn-husking bees, were more acceptable in the West than in the East, especially during the earlier part of the century, when women were in short supply. The scarcity of women made the West a unique place for courtship. For couples in the Old West, dates were often simple yet romantic affairs. They took leisurely walks, ventured out in buggies or wagons for picnics, enjoyed horseback rides, went on hay rides, found moments of intimacy in the hayloft, and danced at social gatherings. Men in the areas with a shortage of women sometimes turned to heart and hand clubs, where they received newspapers with information about women they could correspond with. These newspapers often included photographs of the prospective brides. Over a period of correspondence, a man might successfully convince a woman to journey to the West and marry him. Another intriguing custom was that of bundling. Courting couples would be bundled into a blanket or sack, tied at the neck, and allowed to share the same bed. To maintain modesty and respectability, a long board was placed down the center of the bed, allowing the couple to talk all night, indulged in some cuddling, but abstained from sexual intercourse. While this practice was more common in the New England states, it was occasionally observed in the West as well. In 1849, Eliza Farnham encouraged women to travel to California to meet men and potentially find husbands. However, her efforts were met with limited success, as only 2 women accompanied her. Later, Asa Mercer organized 2 separate trips to take women to Washington, with the aim of becoming brides to the men living there. This historical context makes us appreciate the television show Here Comes the Brides from 1968 to 1970, where three brothers risked their logging business to bring 100 women to Seattle. The hope was that these women would live in the city for a year, become wives, and contribute to settling the territory. Number 3. Courting without real courting. Imagine a world where the pursuit of love and marriage took the form of newspaper advertisements. In the Old West, the Matrimonial News was a unique and widely read periodical that attracted the attention of many hopeful and unattached individuals. In the June 21, 1873 edition of the Denton Journal in Denton, Maryland, this curious publication made headlines. Under the headline, Marriage by Advertisement, the Denton Journal reported on the Matrimonial News, dubbing it the most flourishing property from coast to coast. However, the author did not share this enthusiasm and expressed doubt about its notoriety. They were astonished that between 300 and 400 seemingly sober-minded individuals advertised every week for husbands and wives. It seemed to defy belief that such a number of people were seeking marital partners through these advertisements. The Denton Journal's reporter delved into the reasons behind the Matrimonial News's popularity. They interviewed various people and discovered that many women were eager to find deserving partners, believing that the publication could assist them when traditional methods had failed. On the other hand, the men placing advertisements were often professionals, desperate to marry, and convinced that the newspaper would guide them to a suitable partner. To highlight the nature of the ads, the Denton Journal reprinted a couple of them. One advertisement from a woman named Makla described her desire for a tender, soft, connubial life, and her preference for a manful knight of 40 over a younger dandy. Another advertisement came from a nobleman of English birth and ancient Irish lineage, who was in his late 50s and seeking a lady of about 40 or younger for marriage. The Denton Journal article concluded with cutting remarks about the Matrimonial News, labeling those who contributed to the ads as silly and desperate. The reporter questioned the existence and purpose of such a newspaper and couldn't help but wonder about the success rates of those who sought love through it. Number 2. Marriage through advertisement. In a world where courtship was often seen as a lengthy and formal process, the story of Peter Patterson and Louise Muntle, who met through the Matrimonial News, stands out as the unconventional tale of love. Peter Patterson, a New York resident in 1873, believed he was ailing from various ailments, including headaches, stomach pains, and depression. Despite reassurances from his family physician that he was in good health, Peter's misery persisted. He pondered if smallpox, which he encountered while volunteering at a hospital, might be the source of his discomfort. At a hotel for bachelors, he found life to be rather loathsome. It was during this time that Peter consulted his doctor, sharing his distress and hopelessness. The doctor, seemingly enlightened, suggested a straightforward solution: marriage. However, Peter's resistance to the extended courting process dampened his enthusiasm for the idea. He lamented that traditional courtship involving months of dangling at a woman's apron strings, a process he found tedious. Moreover, Peter believed that eligible women were scarce. In response to Peter's reservations, the doctor recommended an alternative approach: finding a bride through the Matrimonial News. Peter agreed to give it a try and began corresponding with Louise Muntle, a widow living on a Kansas farm. Louise, who described herself as a 40-year-old exceptional cook and seamstress, caught Peter's attention with her willingness to nurse him back to health should he become ill. Peter decided to meet Louise in person, traveling to Kansas. Their first encounter was filled with instant mutual attraction, and Louise described Peter as a nice fellow with plenty of money, in good health, and ready for marriage, although he abhorred the idea of traditional courting. By the end of their first day together, Peter proposed and Louise accepted. Their marriage took place with Louise's grown son and daughter-in-law as witnesses, with a minister pronouncing them man and wife. Louise's exceptional care, which included homemade bread, fresh strawberries, buttermilk, and herb teas, led to Peter's rapid improvement. His health improved, his complexion glowed, and his dimples became more pronounced. In just 2 short months, he was happier and healthier than ever before. Peter shared the news of his marriage with the doctor, stating that he had taken the prescription offered, marriage. He intended to bring his bride back to New York for a Christmas meeting with the physician. The Denton Journal concluded the heartwarming tale with congratulations to the newlyweds. Number 1. Extra long courtships in the Old West. In the American Old West, the prospect of marriage carried different connotations for men and women. Women often saw marriage as their primary path to security, a home, and children. However, it came with the challenges of being tied to domestic responsibilities, bearing multiple children, and serving their husbands. Men, on the other hand, regarded marriage more positively, as it meant companionship, intimacy, and assistance with ranching or farming. They valued their partners who could help with household tasks, raise children, and provide support. For some men, marriage was a means to ensure their children had a mother, and love was not always a prerequisite. Couples were fortunate if respect grew into genuine affection. Despite these general roles and expectations, there were exceptions. Western historical love stories often feature strong, independent women and resilient men who weren't afraid to show their softer sides. While many women faced cruel husbands who viewed them as mere servants and baby machines, there were just as many men who deeply cherished their wives and sought equal partnerships. So, how did these men and women meet and form loving relationships on the frontier in the 1800s? Meetings often occurred at church gatherings, social events, weddings, corn husking bees, and barn raisings. These occasions typically involved food, music, and dancing, providing a social context for courtship. Notably, courtship in the Old West often began at a later age for women than in eastern parts of the United States. Women usually married in their early 20s, while men tended to marry in their mid to late 20s. Courtships in the Old West could be quite lengthy, reflecting the need for couples to truly get to know each other and assess their compatibility for a life on the frontier. Men were expected to demonstrate their ability to provide for a family, be respectful and polite. Women, on the other hand, were expected to be modest, virtuous, and to uphold their reputation. These courtship practices reflected both the social values and constraints of the time and the practical considerations of life on the frontier. Once a couple decided to marry, they would typically announce their engagement to the community and make preparations for the wedding. Engagement rings, while not as common as they are today, were occasionally exchanged as part of the commitment. And there you have it, guys, a glimpse into the wild world of courtship in the Old West. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more exciting content. Thanks for watching.